The park was a battlefield of laughter and cruelty, where children's shouts clashed with the sharp sting of words meant to wound. Ezra Hawthorne, 72, leaned on his cane, his eyes catching the glint of tears on a boy's face across the playground. Before he could stop himself, his feet were moving, his heart pounding with a fire he thought had long faded. Ezra had spent 30 years teaching history, shaping minds with stories of courage and sacrifice, but retirement had left him adrift, a ghost in his own life. That day, as he watched 3 older boys circle a scrawny kid like vultures, something snapped. The smallest, a boy no older than 10, clutched a tattered sketchbook, his shoulders hunched under their taunts. "Freak," one jeered, snatching the book and tossing it into the dirt. Ezra's grip tightened on his cane. He'd seen enough. "Leave him be." Ezra's voice cut through the air, steady but sharp, like a blade honed by years of commanding classrooms. The boys froze, their smirks faltering as they sized up the old man in the worn coat. The leader, a lanky teen with a cruel glint in his eye, stepped forward. "Mind your business, Grandpa," he spat, shoving the sketchbook deeper into the mud with his heel. Ezra didn't flinch. He stepped closer, planting his cane like a flag. "Pick it up. Now." The tension crackled. The boy sneered, but something in Ezra's gaze unyielding, fierce made him hesitate. He grabbed the book, tossing it at the younger kid's feet with a muttered curse before stalking off with his friends. The small boy, trembling, clutched his sketchbook and whispered, "Thank you," before darting away. Ezra exhaled, his heart still racing, unaware of the phone camera that had captured it all from a nearby bench. By evening, the video was everywhere. "Retired teacher stands up to bullies," screamed headlines on social media. Ezra, oblivious, sipped tea in his quiet apartment, the TV humming in the background. He didn't know the world was watching, or that it would soon turn against him. The next morning, Ezra returned to the park, his routine unchanged. The air felt different, heavier, as if the world had tilted slightly. He settled on his usual bench, watching joggers and dog walkers, when a shadow fell over him. The lanky teen from yesterday stood there, flanked by 2 older boys, their faces hard with intent. "You think you're a hero, old man?" the leader snarled, his voice low and venomous. Before Ezra could respond, a fist connected with his jaw. Pain exploded, bright and sharp, as he stumbled back, his cane clattering to the ground. Another blow landed, then another, until he was on his knees, the world spinning. "Stay out of our business," one of them hissed, kicking his cane into the grass before they fled. Ezra's hands shook as he touched his bloodied lip, but he forced himself to stand, his pride stinging more than his bruises. A woman nearby rushed over, her phone already dialing for help, but Ezra waved her off. "I'm fine," he lied, limping home. At home, he avoided the mirror, knowing the reflection would show a man broken not by fists, but by the weight of his own helplessness. He'd spent his life teaching kids to stand up, to be kind, yet here he was, battered for it. The phone rang his daughter, Clara, her voice frantic. "Dad, are you okay? It's all over the news." Confused, Ezra turned on his old laptop, and there it was, the park video, now paired with grainy footage of the attack, uploaded by an anonymous bystander. Comments flooded in, some calling him a hero, others mocking his foolish bravery. One read, "Old man should have stayed out of it." Clara arrived an hour later, her face pale. "You can't go back to that park, Dad. It's not safe." Ezra shook his head, stubborn. "I won't hide, Clara. That boy needed someone." She sighed, knowing argument was futile. Over the next days, the story grew. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. Ezra's face lined, resolute was plastered across screens. Strangers sent letters, some with donations, others with threats. He read each one, his heart torn between gratitude and unease. Then came the twist. A woman appeared at his door, her face vaguely familiar. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Lily's mom. You taught her history 20 years ago." Ezra blinked, memories stirring of a quiet girl who loved to write. "Lily saw your video." The woman continued, tears in her eyes. "She said you were the only teacher who believed in her. She's a counselor now, helping kids like that boy in the park." She handed him a letter from Lily, filled with gratitude and stories of how his lessons shaped her. Ezra's throat tightened. He hadn't known. That night, unable to sleep, Ezra sat at his desk, Lily's letter in hand. He thought of the boy with the sketchbook, of Lily, of the countless students he'd taught. Maybe he wasn't powerless. Maybe one act, however small, rippled further than he could see. The world was still watching, but now, so was Hugh watching for the next chance to stand up. Ezra's story refused to fade. By the second week, his name was a hashtag, a rallying cry for some, a punching bag for others. His apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet routine, buzzed with calls and emails from reporters, activists, even strangers offering to pay his medical bills. Clara, ever protective, screened them all, but Ezra felt the weight of their attention like a storm cloud hovering. He wanted to return to his simple life: morning coffee, park walks, the history books stacked on his shelf, but the world had other plans. One afternoon, a local news van parked outside his building. A young reporter, barely older than his former students, knocked on his door, her smile bright but calculated. "Mr. Hawthorne, your story's inspiring people. Can we do a quick interview?" Ezra hesitated, his bruised jaw still tender. Clara, standing behind him, shook her head, but he waved her off. "5 minutes," he said gruffly, leading the reporter to his modest living room. The interview was gentle at first, questions about his teaching career, the park incident, but then she leaned forward. "Some say you provoked those boys, that you should have walked away. What do you say to that?" Ezra's eyes narrowed. "I say they're wrong. A kid was hurting. You don't walk away from that." The reporter scribbled furiously, and Ezra knew his words would be dissected online by morning. That night, the interview aired, and the comments exploded anew. "Hero," some wrote. "Reckless old fool," others countered. Ezra turned off the TV, his chest tight. He wasn't sure what he'd expected, but the scrutiny felt like a second attack. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Ezra was at the park again against Clara's protests when a man approached, his face weathered but kind. "You're Ezra Hawthorne, aren't you?" he asked, extending a hand. "I'm Marcus, that boy's father." Ezra froze, bracing for anger, but Marcus's eyes held only gratitude. "My son, Tim, told me what you did. He's been drawing again, thanks to you." Marcus pulled out a small sketch, a pencil drawing of a tree with roots curling into a heart. "Tim wanted you to have this." Ezra took the paper, his fingers trembling. The boy's talent was raw but vivid, each line pulsing with emotion. "He's good," Ezra said softly, his voice catching. Marcus nodded. "He's been bullied for years. Never had anyone stand up for him like that." They sat together on the bench, two fathers sharing a quiet moment. Marcus revealed Tim's struggles, how the bullying had pushed him to the edge, how Ezra's act gave him hope. "You didn't just save his sketchbook," Marcus said. "You reminded him he's worth fighting for." The conversation lingered with Ezra long after Marcus left. He tucked the drawing into his coat, a small talisman against the chaos of his new reality. But the peace was short-lived. That evening, Clara burst through his door, her phone in hand. "Dad, you need to see this." She showed him a post from an anonymous account, claiming Ezra had a history of meddling in kids' lives, twisting his years of teaching into something sinister. The accusations were vague but vicious, and they spread like wildfire. Ezra's heart sank. He'd faced skeptics before, parents who questioned his methods, colleagues who called him old-fashioned, but this was different. This was personal, a knife aimed at his legacy. Clara urged him to fight back, to tell his side, but Ezra shook his head. "Words won't fix this," he said. "They'll just twist them more." Instead, he wrote to Lily, the former student who'd reached out. Her response came quickly, offering to organize a community event in his honor, a chance to show the world who he really was. Ezra hesitated, unsure if he wanted more attention, but her words echoed. "You taught me to stand up, Mr. Hawthorne. Now let us stand up for you." The event was set for the following week at the community center where Ezra had once taught night classes. As the day approached, he felt a mix of dread and hope. The morning of the event, he walked to the park, needing the familiar rhythm of his routine. There, he saw Tim, sketching alone under a tree. The boy looked up, shy but smiling, and waved. Ezra waved back, his heart lifting. Maybe this was enough small moments, quiet victories. But as he turned to leave, a figure emerged from the shadows. The lanky teen from the attack stood there, alone this time, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Ezra stiffened, his cane gripped tightly. But the boy's eyes held no malice, only shame. I saw the video. Everyone hates me now. Ezra studied him, seeing not a bully but a kid caught in his own storm. You can still make it right, Ezra said, his voice steady but kind. The boy nodded, then walked away, leaving Ezra with a flicker of hope and a new question. Could redemption be part of this story? The community center hummed with nervous energy as Ezra stepped through its doors. The familiar scent of polished wood and old books stirred memories of late-night classes, where he'd taught adults history with the same passion he'd given his students. Tonight, though, he was no teacher, just a man at the center of a story he hadn't chosen. Lily had outdone herself. Banners lined the walls, proclaiming "Stand up for Ezra," and tables held flyers about bullying prevention. Strangers smiled at him, their faces a mix of admiration and curiosity, while former students, some graying themselves, shook his hand, their voices thick with nostalgia. "You changed my life, Mr. Hawthorne," one said, a woman who'd once struggled with dyslexia. Ezra nodded, overwhelmed, his bruised jaw a quiet reminder of why they were here. The event began with Lily at the podium, her voice clear and fierce. "Ezra Hawthorne didn't just teach history," she said. "He taught us courage, compassion, the kind of strength that doesn't need a fist." The crowd applauded, but Ezra's eyes were on Tim, sitting in the front row with Marcus, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. When Lily called Ezra to speak, he hesitated. Public speaking was second nature, but this felt raw, exposed. He limped to the podium, cane in hand, and cleared his throat. "I'm no hero," he began, his voice steady but soft. "I just saw a boy who needed help. We've all been that boy or known one. Standing up isn't about being strong. It's about being there." The room was silent, hanging on his words. He spoke of Tim's drawing, of Lily's letter, of the kids he'd taught who carried their own battles. "If my story means anything," he said, "let it remind you. One moment can change everything." The applause was deafening, but Ezra barely heard it. His eyes caught a figure at the back, a boy, head down, hood up, the lanky teen from the park. Ezra's heart skipped. Had he come to disrupt? To apologize? Before he could decide, the boy slipped out, unnoticed by the crowd. Ezra's words faltered, but he pressed on, finishing to a standing ovation. As he stepped down, Lily hugged him, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Mr. Hawthorne." But the night wasn't over. As the crowd mingled, a woman approached, her face stern but familiar. "Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Rachel, principal at Westview High." Ezra tensed, expecting criticism, but she softened. "That boy who attacked Yujiki, he's one of mine. I saw him here tonight. He's struggling, but he wants to make amends." She handed Ezra a note, scrawled in messy handwriting. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." Ezra stared at it, torn between anger and pity. Rachel added, "He's in counseling now. Your story's changing him, too." The revelation hit Ezra like a wave. Jake, the bully, wasn't just a villain, he was a kid, lost in his own pain. Ezra tucked the note into his pocket, next to Tim's drawing. He thought of his own students, the ones who'd lashed out, the ones he'd reached. Maybe Jake wasn't so different. Maybe this was the real ripple effect of that day in the park, not just saving Tim, but reaching someone like Jake. The event ended with plans for a community fund to support bullying victims, inspired by Ezra's story. Donations poured in, online and in person, enough to start a program at Tim's school. Ezra felt a flicker of pride, but also exhaustion. Fame was a double-edged sword, lifting him up while exposing his every flaw. Clara drove him home, her silence heavy with worry. "You okay, Dad?" she asked. He nodded, but his mind was on Jake's note, on Tim's drawing, on the weight of being a symbol. The next morning, Ezra returned to the park, unable to stay away. The air was crisp, the playground quiet. He sat on his bench, watching kids play, their laughter free of cruelty. Then he saw him, Jake, alone, picking up litter near the swings. Their eyes met, and Jake froze, as if expecting a rebuke. Ezra raised a hand, a small gesture of peace. Jake nodded, almost imperceptibly, and went back to work. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Ezra pulled out Tim's drawing and Jake's note, holding them side by side. Two boys, two paths, both touched by a single moment. He thought of Lily, of the community center, of the strangers who'd rallied for him. His life, once quiet, was now a tapestry of connections, woven by one act of courage. He wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in years, he felt alive. Ezra's days began to settle, but the echoes of his viral moment lingered. The community fund grew, and Tim's school launched an anti-bullying program, with Ezra as its reluctant figurehead. He avoided the spotlight, but invitations kept coming: schools, libraries, even a podcast. Clara sorted through them, insisting he pick a few. "You're making a difference, Dad," she said, her voice firm but proud. Ezra wasn't so sure. Difference felt fragile when weighed against the bruises still fading on his face. One morning, a letter arrived from Tim's school, inviting Ezra to speak at an assembly. He hesitated, remembering Jake's note, the boy's fleeting appearance at the community center. Could he face a room full of kids, knowing one might be his attacker? But Tim's face, those wide, grateful eyes, pulled him in. He agreed, spending days crafting a speech that balanced honesty with hope. The night before, he sat with his old lesson plans, their margins filled with notes on courage, on history's unsung heroes. He wondered if he could live up to his own words. The assembly was packed, the auditorium buzzing with restless teens. Ezra stood at the podium, his cane a quiet companion. Tim sat in the front row, sketchbook in lap, his father beside him. Ezra scanned the crowd, half expecting Jake, but saw only eager faces. "I'm not here to lecture," he began, his voice steady. "I'm here to tell you about a momentum moment when I saw someone hurting and chose to act. You'll have those moments, too. What you do with them is who you become." The room was silent, absorbed. He spoke of Tim, of the power of small acts, of the courage it takes to stand up or to say sorry. As he finished, a hand shot up. A girl, maybe 15, stood. "What if standing up gets you hurt, like it did you?" Ezra paused, the question cutting deep. "Then you hurt," he said. "But you heal, too. And you keep going, because someone else might need you to." The applause was warm, but Ezra's eyes caught movement at the back. Jake, unmistakable in his hoodie, lingered near the exit. Their gazes locked, and Ezra saw something new: regret, maybe, or resolve. After the assembly, Tim ran up, thrusting a new drawing into Ezra's hands. A portrait of him, cane raised like a sword, a faint smile on his face. "It's you," Tim said shyly. Ezra's throat tightened. "It's perfect, son." Later, as he left the school, Jake approached, his steps hesitant. "Mr. Hawthorne," he said, voice low. "I'm trying to be better. I'm in this program now because of you." Ezra studied him, seeing not the bully but a boy wrestling with his own story. "Keep trying, Jake," he said. "That's all any of us can do." Jake nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders, and walked away. The weeks that followed were quieter. The media frenzy faded, but the community fund thrived, supporting art classes for kids like Tim. Ezra returned to his park bench, his routine reclaimed, but he carried Tim's drawings and Jake's note in his coat, reminders of what one moment could spark. Lily visited often, bringing stories of her work with troubled kids, some inspired by Ezra's example. Clara, too, softened, proud of her father's stubborn heart. One evening, as Ezra sat in the park, a young girl approached, her sketchbook clutched tightly. "Are you the man from the video?" she asked, eyes wide. Ezra smiled, weary but warm. "Just Ezra," he said. She showed him her drawing: a butterfly, vivid and free. "I want to be brave like you," she said. Ezra took the drawing, his heart full. "You already are," he told her. As winter crept in, Ezra's life felt different, not louder, but richer. He wasn't a hero, not really, but he'd become a spark, igniting courage in others. Tim drew more, Jake worked to redeem himself, and strangers shared their own stories of standing up. Ezra's bruises had healed, but the ripples of that day in the park kept spreading, touching lives he'd never know. He looked out at the playground, where kids laughed and ran, their voices a reminder of why he'd acted. The world was messy, cruel at times, but it was also kind, resilient, human. Ezra leaned on his cane, content to watch, ready for whatever moment came next.